The government says it's committed to bringing in legislation so perpetrators hear the impact of their crimes. I mean, this story I have not been able to stop thinking about since it all came out on Friday, the verdict. I think to add insult to injury, of course, she didn't turn up for her sentencing today. I'm a bit torn on this because I feel like if you bring in outright legislation, there might in the future be some victims or victims' families who actually don't want to see the perpetrator in the dock on sentencing, and they might not want to read out their victim impact statement. But I think it absolutely should be on the families to decide whether or not that perpetrator is stood in the dock.
Must be right. I mean, the idea that you can just sort of cower in yourself, you're not actually receiving and hearing the horror of what you did. And I understand in other countries, they're actually forced, if the family want them there, to be in a soundproof cell in case they're going to sort of kick off and scream and shout and things. So there are other smarter ways of dealing with this that I think we should be prepared to look at. And I think the government should actually move at pace on this, because that's clearly, I would have thought, the will of the vast majority of British people.
That's the point, isn't it? Which is that, first of all, the government have made statements about this and they've done nothing about it.
Again.
So, you know, they got the headline saying, you know, we must do this. But also, look, there are some unintended consequences of this, which I think technology and soundproof boxes and various other things can deal with. Because I think that we assume that somebody will just be brought in and hear whatever it is that they're told, and, you know, there may be a commotion as they come in, but they'll be quiet. But they might not be. So there has to be, I think, this sort of three-way process where either you ask the families and say, what would you like? Then have the legislation so that it's actually up to the judge to take away the power from this person, because it's really a power play. And the last thing is that technology can play a part in this, because you can have technology so that you can see them, they can see you and hear you, but, you know, the sound can be taken down or the picture can be taken down should they, you know, behave in such a way that becomes, you know, disruptive. So I think there are lots of things that we can do, but basically the current situation is not satisfactory.
It makes my blood boil, this case, and gives me like bad goosebumps at the same time. I know it's going to be controversial for me to say this, but in cases like this where it's clear cut, I would rather she had the death sentence. I know we don't have it anymore, but for cases like this, bring it back. Bring it back. Let her serve 10 years in a squalid cell by herself so she's properly punished, and then have them executed. This woman has no way she should well, obviously she should never be allowed out, but she should not be allowed to live having taken these lives in the way that she did.
I mean, I can understand sort of the reason why a case like this, as horrifying as it is. I mean, this is the strongest case for the death penalty that you'll ever have. Realistically, I don't think, I mean, murdering babies is really as low as it gets. But obviously, you know, there's so many issues with the death penalty in the sense that it's very expensive. There's a finality to it. If there's a miscarriage of the law, I mean, in the US, you spend so much money just going through the appeals process. I mean, there's so many things that effectively are counterproductive. And just on moral grounds, I just can't agree with it. I do think on the issue of dragging her, or, you know, not allowing criminals that have been convicted to allowing them to just stay in their cells. I understand, you know, how it's like rubbing salt in the wounds. I get it. It's so horrible. You've done these evil things. Why should you be allowed to sit in your cell? But I do think there's something that is a bit distasteful about dragging someone from their cell, because that's effectively what would happen. She would have four police officers or 4 cell guards dragging her by her hair, and I just think that's not dignified of our.
Why does she deserve any dignity? She doesn't deserve any dignity.
That's just what I think. I do think that there should be something where she should see her sentence. She should be able to see it. For me, it's the image of having someone dragged by their hair. I would like to.
That's what she deserves. She deserves to be dragged out of the cell and have her head banged up every step on the way into that courtroom. And yeah, absolutely. There should be no dignity for this woman.
No, but I think that Esther's point is that we can be better.
We can do better than that.
We can do better.
It's undignifying.
Look, I understand the comments about the death penalty, and I understand the comments about dignity or otherwise, or that you shouldn't necessarily treat somebody. But I think that the problem is that if you treat people like that, then it demonstrates that, you know, that maybe
demonstrates that we don't take.
No. It demonstrates that you don't understand the difference between right and wrong.
When it comes to punishment, this country is so weak on so many things. We're going to keep on seeing things like this happening. This woman has murdered babies, and we're here discussing, saying, we're here discussing her dignity. She lost her dignity. She committed the crime. There is nothing.
It's not about her dignity.
Situation for
her.
But
yeah, but I think I think you're turning this on its head to have another conversation, which maybe happens later. But this is about how do you get dignity for the families? How do you get closure for the families who have had to go through 10 months of trial?
So if you ask,
and then
hypothetically speaking, if you ask the families and the family said, "I want her dragged out the cell. I don't care if she's kicking and screaming. I don't care if you pull her by her hair. I don't care if she's got bruises and cuts over her face because she's been banged up every step." If the family said that, would you then say, "Okay, then we can do it"?
Look, I
Because that's an eye
understand
for
it.
an
I
eye,
wouldn't
tooth
feel
for a
sorry.
tooth.
She's the last person I would feel sorry for to see her dragged by her hair and hopefully have a few follicles uprooted. She's the last person I would feel sorry for. But I do think that it is not dignified of our legal system. I would argue her cell is too nice. I want to see one wardrobe and a tin pot for her toilet. She has a very nice, cozy cell, and I would argue that's probably, for me, that would give me more comfort because I know that's where she's going to spend the rest of her life. Instead of having, 15 seconds of dragging that horrid woman by her hair to the cell.
But
it's not going to bring the children back. And I think it's how she lives in for the rest of her life, how the state treats her. That's what is the real punishment.
But then the point about the state, and this is something which I was quite shocked by in terms of the numbers. So Letby victims' families, they could receive £13,000 in compensation. So parents of babies murdered by Letby could receive less than £13,000 in compensation. This so-called bereavement award for those who loved ones due to negligence in the NHS is set by the government and capped in law. In cases which occurred prior to May 2020, the amount of compensation parents will receive is set at just £12,980. Now, listen, do I want to see the NHS paying enormous amounts of money out and taking away? There must be a better way to either fund this or to sort it out. That kind of money, look, no amount of money is going to replace a lost child. Of course it isn't. But on the other hand, when we're talking about a system where the NHS may be held responsible for having not responded quickly enough, does this seem enough to you?
I mean, that's corporate manslaughter.
But no,
I'm sure it has a legal state.
No amount of money could ever be worth.
Outside of obviously this bereavement award, there are other legal channels for them to get a more hefty sum. Obviously, no amount of money will replace the horror that they've gone through, but this is categorically, at least from where I'm sitting, corporate manslaughter. And the way that the NHS Trust handled this, the way that the management team handled this, there's really no case to be made otherwise. And so I'm sure that there has to be other legal avenues for them to get a more hefty sum, because this is the heftier sum, because this is unacceptable.
Absolutely. And it's not just Letby that's under the microscope. A senior manager in charge of nursing when Letby murdered and seriously injured babies in her care has been suspended from her current job, finally, might I add. Alison Kelly and other managers at the Countess of Chester Hospital have been accused of ignoring warnings about Letby. Kelly was working in a similar director role for the Northern Care Alliance NHS Foundation Trust, which runs 5 hospitals in the Manchester area, until she was suspended this morning. I think reading the whole details of this case, and the Times, I don't know if you read it yesterday, did an incredible report on the sort of step-by-step process that they've gone through and looked at all of the files that prove that there are other people to be held accountable here. The whistleblowers were told that they were being bullies. The whistleblowers were told that they would get into trouble if they came forward. Now, that's no system.
And that's why you have to have a proper investigation.
But also, you've got to have proper accountability. And so it's quite right, she's been suspended. There's probably others. We have to understand we need accountability, we need performance in all walks of life, whether it's the private sector or the public sector. And this is one of the most shocking examples.
Absolutely. And we have to deal better with the way that, when whistleblowers come forward, we have to listen and take action and properly investigate.